Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. Today, we're doing things a bit different. I've got 3 guests with me here on the podcast. Yes, I know that's a lot of people sharing airtime, but I'm really excited about this topic today, and I know that all 3 of my guests can speak well to it. Today, we're discussing why sometimes digital transformation fails. So today on the podcast, we've got Jeff Wilhelm, CEO of Infused Innovations, Phil Magnuszewski, COO of Infused Innovations, and Stephen Webster, who's a new guest on the podcast, but not new to our team. He's an executive advisor and plays a crucial role here at Infused Innovations with the work that we do, not only internally, but also with our clients. So let's get into it. I am so excited to have you all here with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Melissa. I appreciate the opportunity again.
Yeah. Sorry for that blank airtime there. It's great to be here. I missed my cue, but it's great to be here. Thank you.
And it is certainly an honor to be on this podcast with you today, Melissa. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Of course. Happy to have you here, Stephen. So in a previous podcast, Phil, you and I talked about what digital transformation is. And today we're here to change up that conversation and talk about what happens when that digital transformation fails. And it does happen. We hear about companies that are so excited to take the plunge. They make the investment, they get everyone on board, but something is missing and their transformation journey just isn't exactly what they had envisioned. So let's pick it up from here. Phil, is there a simple answer to the question, why does a digital transformation sometimes fail?
No, I'm not sure that there's exactly a simple answer to that. But to your point, yes, some of these projects do indeed fail. And it could be anything from some of those ingredients that the client thought were in place, whether it was executive commitment, whether it was the right budget, whether it was time commitments by the resources on their side of the project as well. One of those things may not have been aligned correctly. The other thing that we see sometimes too is that an organization may pick part of their digital transformation journey, or may pick a kind of a sub-project that's part of that as well, that maybe isn't aligned or timed correctly for the organization. As you know, with our approach, we like to build out a foundation, which is critically important in order to get the right tools, the right processes, and the right mindset in place for organizations. It's like trying to say, I want to build a study or a library in my house without pouring the concrete for the foundation, right? So those are some of the things that we see. Jeff, do you have any additional comments on that?
I definitely agree that executive buy-in or executive leadership is one of the primary places where I've seen some of these things fail. When you have a need in an organization to really do something differently or shake things up, of which digital transformation I think is a major catalyst, both of and for. If you don't have the executive team completely, in lockstep around where are we going, communicating the vision to the team, many times you've got that really tough dynamic of the team thinks it's something different than the middle management or executive team might think. And frankly, the consultants might have a different perspective on it as well, depending on which camp they're spending more time with. I also really like your example around sort of where do things fit holistically, or where do things fit in the overall landscape, right? It's very much like, if you're, to use your sort of home improvement example, right? If you're putting a new pool in your backyard, but then, you realize that in order to build that addition to your kitchen later, you got to get heavy machinery where you just put your pool, right? That's the sort of stuff where a lot of times organizations, if it's not sort of looked at absolutely holistically and really with an order of operations and what's the reconciliation of that against other tactical elements or strategic elements, you really have a big gap there. I don't know, Stephen, what's your thoughts on it?
I think, Jeff, that folks who go into these thinking that it's a project is that actually the beginning of it failing, because this is not a project at the end of the day. This is about transforming your business to be competitive in a new world where the digital expectations, whether you are in the business to business world or the business to consumer world, the digital expectations have been ratcheted up significantly, especially over the course of the last year. So I think making sure that you've got the right mindset, not only the alignment at the executive level, Jeff, which is exactly what you need, but making sure that you've got the right mindset at that executive level that says this is an ongoing journey of our business to stay competitive. It's not an event. It's not a project. It's something that needs to become part of our DNA to become successful, not just in the first phase of the digital transformation, but in all of the phases that will follow.
Yeah, actually, it's funny that you bring it up that way, because I've had customers ask, well, how do we know when we're done? Like, how do we know when we've checked the box for digital transformation, right? And it is not a destination. Like, you don't check a box and say, oh, digitally transformed, problem solved. It's the kind of thing where it is really a journey, and there are many stops on that journey. And you may change the route you're taking based on traffic ahead or road work or things like that. But it is definitely, as you said, the kind of thing where there's really it is an ongoing transformation. It is, when you get to stop A, there's 40 more stops ahead, but when you get to stop 40, there's 40 more stops ahead, right?
Right.
I love that. And, we know that it's a transformation journey. And in that journey, it's an investment of time, money, effort, and a lot of resources. How can an organization gauge if they're prepared or ready to start that journey? And is there a time where an organization is maybe better prepared? How can an organization gauge when they have the appropriate resources to start their digital transformation?
No, I think that's a great question. A lot of it comes down to planning and really open and candid conversations within the organization among the executive leadership, and also functional departments too, because as Jeff alluded to, or actually explicitly said earlier, there sometimes is a misconception of what is digital transformation and what is my role going to be, either as someone within a department, someone who leads a department, or someone who is even as part of the executive leadership of an organization. So I think that planning is a big piece of it. Part of the process that we take, and not to get too far ahead of ourselves, is really the art of the possible workshops that we do with organizations, and really kind of teasing a lot of that out, because some organizations maybe haven't gone through that kind of thought process in the past. And then kind of bringing that up, talking through where they are, where they want to go. It will help create a blueprint with how to do what's going to happen over the next 24 or 36 months across the organization.
Yeah, a lot of organizations, Melissa's point, don't know what they don't know, right? How do they know if we need digital transformation? How do I know we can do digital transformation? Why digital transformation, right? So I completely agree. There's the workshop side of it, which is like, all right, well, here's some things you may not know exist, or things that you may not realize can benefit your organization. But even before that, I think if some CEOs are sort of those outward looking, inward, different types of CEOs, where they may see something. I guess over the last 12 months, there hasn't been a lot of airplane travel, but historically, you pick up a magazine, you see what some other industry folks are doing, or what Harvard's talking about in their publications, or what Gartner or Forrester are talking about in theirs, and you really get a sense of like, where are different industries going, what might be happening in an industry adjacent to mine, and that starts some thought process. But I think sometimes that can be also really hard, because it's scary for some CEOs to say, maybe what I'm doing now is not the best thing, right? Like, that's a scary thing, especially if you don't realize that there are partners out there that can help you turn that into an opportunity, right? So that sort of CEO that's willing to say, I don't have all the answers, I need somebody to talk to, that's the perfect type of CEO that we like to work with. But that is not all CEOs, right? There is absolutely the CEOs where ego gets in the way, or history gets in the way, or baggage, or the way things have always been done, or whatever gets in the way. So not saying any of those CEOs are listening to our podcast, but if any of them are, we are happy to have those conversations and consider those really safe spaces where we can talk about things that are scary and things that are opportunities. And we really enjoy those conversations.
And whether Jeff, it's a magazine on an airplane, like you mentioned, or it's an Art of the Possible workshop that we run, what's important is the definition of the business case that is going to be transformative for the business in a way where they can see ROI on that investment. I think a lot of these projects start with the expectation that they're really looking at it from, how is this going to impact my business or my customer's business? And they are all looking for very tangible ROI. So what's really important is being able to pick and choose that business use case that's going to maximize that return on their investment, because then the journey really begins. When you're in you have a public company, right? A public company is under the eyes of their shareholders, and lots of times they're making these giant investments, and then they're basically being held accountable for the amount of the investment that they have and the return on that shareholder investment. So there's a different pressure with a publicly held company as well versus a privately held company who can really think about it along a different set of metrics.
Absolutely. And Stephen, I'm sure this is an important part of the journey. Can you talk to me about the importance of communication and a unified commitment among the executives in that organization for a digital transformation?
Yes, Melissa. And Jeff and Phil sort of highlighted earlier how important it is. I've had the opportunity to work with leaders in the organization who tried to embark on their own digital transformation journeys. And to be honest with you, unfortunately, trying to be an influencer in that journey normally doesn't end up that well. So having that complete senior level commitment where it's a top down and the senior leadership believes it, and people are held accountable for it. It can't be a hobby, Melissa. What I found is a lot of the projects that I've worked on is it becomes another job for the people who are running the digital transformation effort. It's an add-on to their job, right? Really impossible to succeed when you're adding on an additional layer of responsibility without maybe necessarily giving those folks the bandwidth and the opportunity and the resources to be successful. From a communication standpoint, these are very important initiatives for every single one of these businesses, and that communication model needs to be put in place where they are communicating with all of their employees about it, keeping a scorecard about it, energizing people around it so that you are minimizing any of the disruptions or any of the things that might get in the way of these very important projects. Generally speaking, these projects do take some time, and there's fatigue that enters into every organization when they say, well, we're a year into this, where are we? Or we're 18 months into this, where are we? So keeping that momentum and keeping that top of mind awareness throughout the organization, Melissa, is really critical to keep everyone on board. Jeff, over to you on that one.
Yeah, actually, I think communication is a huge opportunity to getting the organization along for the journey, which I think ultimately drives success in a lot of these engagements. I recall one of our customers that was going through significant M&A. They were doing some acquisitions. They were really changing their organization, and that can be really scary because with that comes cultural implications and sort of the whole staffing and HR side of the complexity around changing an organization in that way. But they were also going through elements of digital transformation and trying to change the way they delivered services and the technology and security models through which some internal tasks and stuff were happening. But it was a perfect opportunity, right? If you look at it through that lens, it's these people, put yourselves in the people who are coming into the organization. They don't know anything about this new organization they're joining. They really want the opportunity to understand, why is this a good thing, right? Why is this an exciting thing? Well, that's a perfect way to message some of the benefits of digital transformation too. And whether you're going through M&A or not, every staff wants to know that the journey their organization is taking is one that is, mutually beneficial. It's good for themselves, their families, their careers, the customers they serve, the organization as a whole. It's sort of the rising tide lifts all boats. And I think digital transformation speaks to that. Communication is the enabler of that because it allows you to sort of message the meaning of these positive improvements in a way that gets everybody excited about them and gets everybody sort of moving in the same direction. So communication is super important in a well-designed digital transformation strategy. I don't know, Phil, I probably stole your story a little bit there because I think you've told that one before.
No, that was good. Well done, Jeff. Well done. I'll go back to something Stephen said, which is, I think, critically important. This can't be a part-time job or an add-on job for people in the organization. There may be some things that are being worked on, that may be the case, but generally speaking, there's the old phrase from Jack Welch, which is, you can't dabble in business that you want to be good at, right? You can't dip your toe in the digital transformation waters, right? It's got to be something that's front and center, something that's committed to. And it's that North Star, Stephen, as we talk about, right, for the organization. It's how do we push the organization forward? How do we change the mindset of the executive team and the folks that are supporting that and then changing the way that we approach our business and go to market. I think that's the key thing, and communication is so critically important to that.
Let's jump into velocity and scale. It's one thing to have an idea of what you want your digital transformation to look like, but actually then having the resources and the ability to scale and map it out is crucial. Jeff, can you tell me how important it is to really understand your resources when you're mapping out that transformation?
Yeah, and the whole velocity side, I've seen tech intensity used to sort of quantify and qualify, I guess, internal reconciliation around what does it take to do X, right? So the question is a really good one. We see organizations that say, we want to get here, but we only have the resources to get here, right? And first off, I would challenge that, right? Again, to Stephen's point, and Phil's, right, the whole dabbling concept. If your organization is absolutely focused on transforming, there is no limit to what an organization can do. But sometimes it does take outside partners and guidance to help an organization sort of chart that journey, figure out what is attainable, right? We don't want an organization to say full steam ahead on this at the expense of all their existing customers and the revenue cycle and stream that goes along with that, right? So there is obviously some thoughtful sort of leadership that has to drive that, timeline and resource constraint and that the perspectives around that. I think that's a lot of where we come in, right? I think we help organizations understand what's possible, but what's also feasible, what's attainable, what the timelines are that are realistic, where technology can play in some of that, because digital transformation is not just a technology story. In fact, in many cases, it is not a technology story. It is a story around automation. It's a story around workforce development. It's a story around understanding key resources, right? Those could be data, there could be technology there, but in many cases, it's human resources. It's where do we fit in a marketplace, right? The whole SWOT analysis side of what a good digital transformation actually means. Point is that you're absolutely right. The trajectory and the speed and all of those things do play together. But having an outside party, I think, guiding some of that really does impact an organization and how much they can actually attain. Stephen, I've liked the way you've sort of answered this one in the past, so I'll throw it over to you.
Jeff, there's a great example of this as well with regard to scale and velocity. And if you just look at the Target Corporation over the course of the last couple of years, they really got ahead of where the changing consumer was with regard to pickup and understanding how fulfillment centers were going to work and begin to transform their businesses, right, from a consumer perspective. And COVID, really take them to a whole other level after what happened there. Do you know that last year they grew their business 20.5%, and that their growth of $15 billion in sales because of their digital transformation was more growth from a revenue top line perspective than they had in 11 years previous to that. So that's a really an excellent example, right, of leadership seeing where the market is going, making those required underlying investments to satisfy that changing consumer requirements, and then capitalizing on that or being able to leverage that in a way where they had awesome scale to create those sort of results for their business. So Jeff, that's I think just an excellent example of organization that saw the future, embraced it, did what they needed to do, and really capitalized on that and built an even better business than the one they had before.
I have to say that's pretty impressive growth, considering in many jurisdictions and in many places people couldn't even physically go into a store, and for a store that was traditionally brick and mortar, very much bound to physical premise, that's a really impressive growth number to show.
It is, right?
I want to jump into this idea of we understand that the resources are important, and part of those resources are going to be your team members, the people that you work with. So would you say that an organization has to have the right individuals to ensure that digital transformation runs smoothly? So, for example, software engineers who have access to and can interpret data and understand the latest programming languages, or product and brand managers and advisors who can anticipate what customers want and the future of what that organization will look like. How important are your people as a resource throughout this transformation?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I would say it doesn't hurt to have internal resources, to have folks who you can point in a given direction and let them do what they do really well. I will say it's more important to have the right people, not necessarily from the skill set perspective, but from a philosophical perspective, that they're bought in, that they're willing and able to make change in the organization. I think having people with that type of mindset is much more important than having the right people with the right skill sets. Most organizations, especially the ones that we work with, aren't going to have all the skill sets when it comes to resources to do all or some or pieces of a digital transformation initiative. I think it's important for the core organization to be good at collaborating, good at working with external resources, even if it's someone you hire part-time or a consulting firm that you bring in to do a piece of it or whatever that ends up looking like. I think collaboration, philosophical approach, those are the two biggest pieces when it comes to resources that I would, if I was running a digital transformation initiative in an organization, that's what I would be looking for, because you can always train people. Stephen, what are your thoughts on that?
I think the thing that's important is probably most organizations won't have all of the resources on their staff to do it. So to Phil's point, finding those complementary resources, Melissa, is the right thing to do. But what this is this is really about breaking through boundaries. This is really about going places that you've never been before. And lots of times when you're operating a business, you know of the business that you're operating. You don't necessarily know of the business that you need to be operating a year from now or 2 years from now or 5 years from now. So bringing in those external resources and folks who have had experience with doing things differently than the way you've done them inside of your organization is really highly complementary, and I think a requirement for really accomplishing the tasks that you want to accomplish and achieving your digital transformation goals.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes that means even bringing in a partner. Can you talk to me about the importance of having a partner when getting ready to start your digital transformation? What is the benefit of having someone like us as a partner to support them as an organization as they go through their journey?
Yeah, I think Phil touched on this a little bit earlier, Melissa, which is you want to bring different experiences to this journey, right? You want to bring a broad base of experiences. Jeff mentioned earlier around reading the magazines on the plane, right, where you'd get all of a sudden an idea from an industry that you're not familiar with, but it prompts you to think differently about your business. So bringing in those consulting resources or folks who have a broad experience across industries, it's amazing how you can apply learnings from one industry to another industry, even though they look completely different. But taking those nuggets and taking that learning and being able to apply that to a new line of thinking to sort of break through some of these barriers, you really find that having the right partner to help you think through that is really a critical success factor in any digital transformation initiative.
Yeah, and just Stephen, that's great, and I agree 100%. And it's part of, if you're going to hike Mount Everest, you can do it on your own if you wanted to, because someone did that, for a first time, right? But having a Sherpa, having a guide, someone who's been there before, having someone who knows where the pitfalls are, where the typical challenges are going to be. Digital transformation, as we've been talking about here, isn't just about the technology. There's a whole adoption component to this, right? We talked about communication, but once something is put into place, how do we get people trained up? How do we make sure they're using the tool sets or using or following the new workflows and processes associated with that? So working with a partner who's been there and done that with other organizations, has a defined process that works, and that's constantly being, iterated upon, I think is critically important for helping accelerate the whole digital transformation process for an organization.
I really, really like that analogy, Phil. I think it's so important having someone to help us understand that there will be moments of failure and there will be pitfalls and there are going to be things that we have to work through, and having someone to help us guide us through that. I appreciate you all for joining us here on the podcast today. Jeff, Phil, Stephen, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me about why digital transformation can sometimes fail and those various reasons why they do and what an organization can do to ensure success. And to our listeners, we appreciate you as well. Thanks for listening. If you are looking for someone to partner with as you begin your digital transformation, we would love to chat with you. Feel free to send us an email at info@infusedinnovations. See you next time.